right, I think we can go ahead and get started. I will kick things off. My name is Taya Sapp. I'm the Interim Director of Admissions for the full-time MBA program. Really excited to tell you more about finance and investment banking. It is, there's a lot of incredible opportunities for our students in this area. So really excited to have you on and telling you more about what the opportunities look like. I also am joined by Amari. Do you want to introduce yourself, Amari?
Sure, thank you. My name is Amari Love. I am the more sort of finance career development for the CDO office here at Ross. I've been here just over 8 years. Ross BBA, Kellogg MBA, and spent my my MBA summer at Goldman doing investment management on Wall Street, and then doing equity research and portfolio management on the buy side and sell side for years afterwards. So I work with students in all phases of finance, investment banking, venture capital, private equity, corporate finance, real estate, help them on all things sort of strategy and interviewing and prep.
Great. As you heard, Amari has a really strong background in this space in particular, so we're lucky to have him on the team and is a huge resource for our students. So we will be telling you more about how that works in a few minutes. So I'm going to start off by sharing a little bit of a zoomed out perspective about what our career stats look like at Michigan Ross. We love to use this phrase, go blue, go anywhere, both in terms of industry and function, but also in terms of geography. So you see here that over 20% of our students overall in the class go to the West Coast, about 20% to Chicago, about over 30% to the East Coast. Obviously, things are a little bit different when we zoom in on investment banking or corporate finance roles in particular. But I think it's really good to know that your network is this diverse, both in terms of industry and in terms of geography. You are going to have a network that is truly global and can go blue and go anywhere. You see some of our top employers include JP Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman, a lot of the top banks. And you can also see that we have 99% of our students this past year that received job offers within 3 months of graduation. So some really incredible stats, and we'll go a little bit further into what our finance and investment banking paths look like. So this is a sample of some of the employers where students who graduated this past year and some of our alumni are working. Really diverse group of companies, and you can see that 15% of our class went into that just graduated this year went into finance careers. I think it's also really interesting to know that about 2/3 of those went into investment banking. So it's a lot of the students in this are specifically going into investment banking, and that's why you see a lot of the banks here. And it's no secret that the salary packages are pretty strong in that path. So it's this past year with our class that just graduated, the median salary package was $225,000. So that includes the base salary, median base salary plus the signing bonus. And you can dive deeper into some of those stats on our website that we'll share out some links later. But really, really incredible stats here that we are proud of. So I want to make sure I introduce a few of our students that we have joining us to talk about their experiences. So Karnika, could you tell us a little about your background and why you decided to come to Ross?
Sure, Taya, thank you. And hi, everyone who's on the line. I'm Karnika. I'm originally from India. Studied econ in my undergrad and then spent the bulk of my career with BlackRock in their financial markets advisory business. During my time there, spent a lot of time on complex, sophisticated bond valuation projects, but felt that I wanted to move to a more strategic advisory role. So I decided to come here to the US for an MBA to pivot to banking. Coming from a strong finance background, I looked at my MBA as a 2-year window, sort of, to really give myself the opportunity to learn about different industries and functions so that when I go back into finance, I'm positioned for success in the long term. And so what I really liked about Ross was the opportunity to get involved in a lot of these action-based learning opportunities. I think that come through a lot of programming, right from MAP to things like crisis challenge that happens in the winter, to student run funds that we'll talk about shortly, to also like a range of electives that have like an element of putting things into action. So I liked all of that, and I was really excited about that opportunity. And not to mention, I saw a really impressive spread of alumni across different industries and banks that I was targeting. And so it was a really easy choice for me. I recruited for banking, like I said, last fall, and then over the summer interned with Morgan Stanley in New York, and I'm happy to be joining them back full time next year.
Nice. Congratulations on that news, on the offer to be going back there. And Karnika, you highlighted a lot of the things that are so critical to Ross, things like action-based learning to really find an environment where you can take risks and truly learn by doing. I think that's why a lot of people choose Ross. It's something we're known for. And there's a lot of opportunities to do that, to build out skill sets beyond just finance, and thinking about your leadership and what those things look like. And so I think that's really important. And obviously alumni are a huge part of the Ross experience. So glad that was a part of your decision too, because we have an incredible alumni base that's very involved in our student experience. So let's pass things over to Jen. Do you want to share a little bit about your background and some of the reasons that you decided to come to Ross?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Taya. So hi, everyone. I'm Jen Kalmbach. I'm originally from Newport Beach, California. I went to UC Berkeley for my undergrad, where I got my degree in media studies. And prior to Ross, and immediately after graduating from Berkeley, I first worked in entertainment, first as an agent's assistant at a talent agency, and then later as an executive assistant to a film production executive, first at Paramount Pictures, then at Lionsgate. And then most recently, before Ross, transitioned over to SoulCycle, where I was an instructor talent manager. And I decided to come back and get my MBA because while I was at SoulCycle, Equinox became a majority stakeholder in our business. And that transaction was really fascinating to be not necessarily a part of, but just to bear witness to. And I really wanted to be more involved in transactions such as that. So decided to come pursue my MBA. And I think what made Ross stand out to me specifically as a place to pursue investment banking was, as you can see, I went to UC Berkeley, which is a giant school, and it's very easy to get lost in the giant pool that there is. And I really felt like out of my MBA experience, I wanted something super community driven. And like Taya said from the beginning of this presentation, go blue, go anywhere. And I wasn't quite sure, though I knew I wanted to do banking, exactly where I wanted to do banking. So wanted to give myself that optionality of maybe LA, maybe San Francisco, maybe New York City, but ultimately decided on New York City. And I interned at Morgan Stanley this summer, also with Karnika. So we got to be there together, which was really fun. But I was in the generalist pool. So I got the opportunity to work with a couple different coverage groups. And I think what, in addition to sort of the community-based aspect of Ross that stands out, something I really want to highlight as a benefit of Ross is just how small the investment banking pool is relative to other schools. So especially at Morgan Stanley, getting to sit alongside investment banking associates from other MBA programs and talking to my friends who recruited alongside classes of 90 to 100 people recruiting for investment banking, our cohort was about 28 people. And so really having that small group of people relative to the rest of the opportunities available was something that I think is a huge advantage to Ross students, and definitely something to consider when thinking about where you want to pursue your MBA. I'm currently president of the MBA Finance Club because, you know, recruiting for banking was definitely a result of how involved the MBA 2 class was in our success, and I wanted to give that back. So I'm also a peer coach for investment banking and can absolutely answer any questions about how to transition from a non-finance to career to a very hard finance career and anything of that nature. So I'm super happy to be here and can't wait to tell you all more.
Yeah, Jen, I love that you talked about the cohort size as an advantage. I think there's a lot of that's something we'll dive a little bit deeper into on the next slide too. But I think it's one, just thinking about who you're recruiting with and what that means. But I think it's also the other people really well, and you're building a supportive community, both when you're interning side by side over the summer, but before that, and to have that support group that's so close knit is also, I think, a really big benefit. All right, so I want to start things off with a few things we're excited about. A couple of things that I think are big highlights to the program. We just a couple of weeks ago wrapped up our professional development week when some students take a fall break, others spend the time learning about different companies and doing some travel. So Amari, do you want to talk through what the treks are, explaining what they are and what students can expect from those?
Sure. Yeah. So these treks specifically that we're talking about on this slide were investment banking driven, right? And so for the week of professional development week, October 17th to the 21st, pretty much all the IB students, so it was about 39 of them, as well as me and Ty from the Career Development Office went out to New York to meet with 14 different banks over the course of 5 days, right? So it was a great opportunity to not only sort of connect and hear more from these banks. That a lot of them had come to campus already in the September, October timeframe, but to actually get into the buildings and get a feel for what the ethos and energy is like at all these different companies, get a real sense for how they are unique and differentiated in terms of how their platform is structured and kinds of product and coverage groups that they have. And really get the students a feel for where's going to be the best fit for them, given what they're excited about and given what they're good at, right? So we also had a couple of happy hours while we were out there, one sponsored by Ross CDO, where we had a ton of our alumni out there that were able to come out, which was a really good event. And a couple of the happy hours also driven by the banks. And so we had that going on in New York. The week after, some of the students did a trip out to San Francisco to meet with some banks, some went out to Chicago as well. I also did an investment management trek to Chicago, a one-day thing a few weeks prior to that, where we met with a VC, a private equity firm, a hedge fund, and a private wealth firm. So these are all great opportunities to really get feet on the ground and get a feel for what these companies are really like and interact and connect. It really gives the students some good intel for when interviews happen, a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, to get us so they can actually articulate a credible story for why they're a fit at this specific bank or this specific fund.
Awesome. Yeah, I know students find that super helpful to have that additional touch point and understanding the culture a little bit better, seeing the space can go a long way. And so I think those treks have been really valued. Another thing we're really excited about, we have 7 different student-run investment funds at Ross. A lot of our students going into banking are involved in these funds, find it super helpful to just gain hands-on experience, learning what goes into making an investment, figuring out how to manage a fund, what all those things look like. And each of those funds has a different focus. So one is focused more on social impact related investments. One is looking at specifically Series A stage companies. There's one that's looking at making investments in international small to medium enterprises. So each one of them has a different focus. And I think a number of people really find it helpful that there is that variety and there is that extra experience for those action-based learning things like Karnika was talking about. Amari, another thing we're super excited about is the stats this year and how well our students did with recruiting, the number of offers they got. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure, numbers have been great, not just this past year, but the year prior, really. Ever since I've been here, I've been here 8 years now, but getting progressively better. So this past summer, so summer 22, which Jen and Karnika were a part of, over 93% of our students that interviewed for investment banking roles received at least one offer that was in line with the year prior, which was also over 93% as well. So it's not just a one-off. The years prior to that, we were around the 86% range or so. So things are getting even better, even amid a pandemic and really the inability to go out and travel a lot of times to these banks. This trek that we did to New York was the first one we've been able to do in 3 years. But even with all that, the numbers have been extremely solid, and really a testament to not just to the students, but also to the career support resources that we will talk about a little bit later. And so 93% over each of the last 2 years. And that, so this past year, we had 28 full-time MBAs that received, let me just check that number, 28, yeah, full-time MBAs that were pursuing banking. 28 got offers, but of those 28, they received a total of 66 offers, right? So it's not just they were getting just one offer here or there, 66 offers, and could have been easily more than that, as a lot of the students sort of took themselves out of the race, either accepting early offers or just shutting down the rest of their interviews once they decided they're going with the bank that made them an offer, right? So the story is there's a very healthy, robust supply-demand dynamic, as Jen sort of alluded to earlier, and a ton of opportunities, regardless if you want to go New York, Chicago, or San Fran, regardless if you want to go bulge, boutique, or mid-tier. Pretty much, whatever you want to do, there's the ability to do it.
I love it. Another example of Go Blue, Go Anywhere.
Yes.
In terms of the type of bank, the city that you want, all of those things. It's a great place to be if you're interested in banking. You have options.
Yeah, and not just banking. I know we'll do another webinar next week, but I mean, this was the first year that there have been actually more students doing buy-side finance work than investment banking. So with 28 investment banking students, but 30 doing buy-side work, meaning venture capital, private equity, private wealth, or real estate. So a ton of opportunity across the board.
Yeah. Awesome. Go Blue, Go Anywhere goes even further. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into what the resources are that are going to help you get those multiple offers out there. So Amari, do you want to talk about what the Career Support Network looks like?
Sure, a robust amount of resources here around. So it starts with the CDO staff coaches like myself, coaches who have experience within these industries, that have worked on sort of both sides of the fence, you know, working and hiring, and just coaches like me who have been doing this now for 8 years. So I've seen hundreds of students pursue these industries and sectors and jobs, and you see what has worked, and you see what has caused students to struggle, and it's just an extremely valuable experience that allows me to give really value-added advice to the up-and-coming students each year. And so that's sort of how half of our office is set up at the Career Development Office. The other half is the Employer Relations team, and they are corporate facing. So they manage and develop those relationships with the companies, making sure that they get onto our website, making sure they have rooms to present in, and helping to coordinate and schedule the treks as well, and also looking to get more and more companies to come and recruit at Ross. So we work together. The ER team is corporate facing, and I and the other staff coaches are student facing. And so the staff coaches also hire and manage and train the peer coaches, of which Jen and Karnika are, right? And so we have close to 100 different MBA 2s that are our CDO peer coaches, paid by us to help teach and support the MBA 1s for all of their employment pursuits for internships, right? So they're the ones who lead the weekly fact groups. the acronym for Functional Accountability Career Teams. And these are sort of once a week sessions that the peer coaches lead to help make sure that you specifically are able to make sure your resume is tied and your Odyssey, your answer to tell me about yourself is solid, and you're ready to answer behavioral questions, and you're solid on technical questions, right? So they work with you each week to make sure you're where you're supposed to be at each sort of phase of the academic calendar, right? So you have those three things, and then you also have the career clubs that are run by the students. As Jen has leadership position with the finance club. So as it relates to investment banking, the finance club's investment banking silo meets once a week on Sunday afternoons, and that's the whole group of this year 40 students will be there each week talking through sort of big picture themes of where you guys should be. Here's what's going to happen on the track. Here's what companies are coming in this week. Here's what you need to look out for interviews that are coming up for. So you have that once a week going on, and then the fact groups are that on a much more intimate level, right? So whether you have 40 people in the silo meeting, it might be you and 4 other people in the fact group. So you can talk more specifically about your own issues, your own questions, your own resume, and so on, right? So you have the staff coaches, you have the ER team as well, you have the peer coaches that we talked about, you have the student run clubs, and all of that sort of builds the pipeline for our alumni, which is as robust as any university in the world, hundreds of thousands of people deep, and they just seem to just always be willing to connect and help and support those that are coming up behind them, right? So really unmatched amount of career resources here.
Yeah, literally incredible career support, as the slide header says. But I also want to talk about how, recruiting particularly for this path starts really early. And so about how early the support starts, because I think that's something fairly unique about Ross too, a big advantage. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit, Amari, about like what that timeline looks like leading up to all of those resources that you'll be using during the school year.
Sure. Yeah. Starts with the Canvas recruiting course that all full-time MBAs will get access to. I think we start that in the really early spring. And this Canvas course is really sort of constructed and put together to have you where you need to be for when classes begin. And it really goes over all phases of the recruiting process. It starts with career assessment. We have all of our students do Career Leader, which is a tool, self-assessment tool to help you sort of figure out what's the best fit for you, given your interests, given your skills, and given your motivations. Then we do launch appointments with all 400-ish or so students, where each of the coaches, so there's right now like 5 coaches, and so we each meet with maybe 80 of the students on a one-on-one basis to connect, get a feel for your backstory, get a feel for what your goals are and how we can support you, and talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available. Then we will do the functional webinars that happen over the course of the summer. So for example, I'll do a functional webinar. I did a couple. I did one for investment banking. I did one for VC and private equity, where we'll have a rising second year on the call with me talking about their recruiting experience, talking about what their internship is like thus far over the summer. We go over the timeline for each specific industry pursuit and answer any sort of questions you have. And so that's sort of part of the research process that you'll be going through. There'll be those webinars, as well as alumni panels that we do over the course of the summer. So for me, again, I did 2, where I did an investment banking alumni panel where I had 4 bankers, actually 3 this year. One of them selected the last second, but we usually have 4 bankers from 4 different banks across 4 different cities at 4 different stages of their career, talking about what the job is, what the life is, and how it evolves as you elevate, right? So it's interesting to hear from a kind of brand new associate, a senior associate, a VP, and then a director, and how the job changes, what's the pie chart look like as an associate, and how does that pie chart of duties change as you become an MD, right? Your job used to be 40% in PowerPoint. Now, when you're an MD, is that 40% go to 60%? Or does it go to 20%, right? Hearing those kinds of stories, I think, is really sort of interesting. Helps you frame the fit in your own mind, whether or not this makes sense for you, given what you're excited about and given what you're good at, right? And so the course then helps you build your branding documents, like your resume and your LinkedIn. We have networking sessions, we have a session around strategy for video recruiting and video conferencing tips. And then ultimately, by the end of the summer, going through the course, going through your launch appointments, going to those webinars, doing your research, looking at the panels, you're ready to sort of pick out what your plan A is going to be, and thus what your fact group will be. And then we place you into that fact group, and you get to hang out with our wonderful peer coaches like Jen and Karnika.
Yeah. I think that's a good transition into our next slide, where you're going to learn about peer coaches and fact groups. And Mari said this earlier, but just to reiterate, fact group stands for Functional Accountability Career Team. And both Jen and Karnika are leaders. Like Amari said, these are experienced MBA 2s who, they both interned at Morgan Stanley over the summer. So they are well positioned to tell you what they went through. They're trained by the Career Development Office, but from their personal experience. And I think a lot of times there's value in having, advice both from a peer and from the career coaches, and having that, those two things to partner together is really helpful. So Karnika, do you want to talk a little bit about what a peer coach is, what a fact group is, and what people can expect from that as a resource?
Yeah, and for sure. Happy to talk about. I think fact group is an incredible system of support that I feel is unique to Ross. Essentially, like Amari and Taya mentioned, as soon as you join school, you're part of a fact group, which consists of 4 to 5 of your batchmates who are also recruiting for banking. And then each group is led by an MBA 2 who went through a similar process the previous year. And then together, this group journeys along from like September to November, period of 10 weeks, where they meet weekly and they go through every aspect of recruiting for that career path. So in case of banking, it's technical prep, behavioral prep, market prep at a high level. It's almost like a class in that there is a set curriculum that you see on the slide, right from being able to develop your story for IB, refining it, practicing it, going through comprehensive topics, technical topics like valuation, accounting, merger models, and then really culminating into interview prepping and mock practices and so on. And it's almost it's like a class in that also that there is like weekly deadlines and assignments and sort of homework that people are expected to do and come prepared with. So my fact group experience last year was awesome because I think, one, it really brought a lot of structure to my preparation. Banking recruiting is hard and everything kind of comes at you at the same time. And so what fact group and the curriculum helps to do is really structure your prep over 10 weeks and kind of gives you a sense of control on the process. And second, it really helped me be accountable. Because every week my MBA 2 would ask me or like test me on concepts that I was supposed to have studied over the past week. And so it wasn't an easy, session, but it always like reinforces things that I need to do and kind of with my peers. And the most amazing thing also about fact groups is that it was collaborative in that regardless of your background and comfort with finance, everybody came together, like those 4 or 5 people came together and learned from each other. And also at the same time, it was customized in that like the feedback was specific to you and was personalized enough that you can work on or identify your improvement areas and work on it. I remember last year I spent hours with my fact group leader trying to refine my story for why banking, just because it wasn't like coming out the way I wanted it to come out. So there's a lot of personalized feedback and like support structure in fact group, which is very instrumental in my view to getting that job. And this year, like Tia and Imari mentioned, Jen and I and several others are leading fact groups of our own. Now we're helping first years go through this process. And I think why fact group is so successful at Ross is because of the strong paid forward culture that we have. And so the reason why we're investing so much time and energy in helping first years is because someone else did it for us. And we just find it's very natural for us to want to help and put that time and make sure that that network stays strong. And on that network, actually, the fact group and the entire concept of this really helps us build connections with our senior batch as well as our junior batch. And so when we're entering banking as an industry, we already have points of contacts across different banks that we can reach out to. And that's like just a very incredible system. I'm happy for Jen to add because I know she's also leading a fact group. Otherwise, Jen can also talk about the other pillar of support we have, which is the finance club.
Yeah, I mean, you covered all the main points, but I think just to reiterate, like, again, why I applied to Ross was a sense of community. And within your fact group too, it really helps drive that home because, you've got your banking cohort in general, which is, larger, and you've got your smaller fact group. And I became pretty close with my fact group, just meeting week over week, quizzing each other every single night. So it really is such a unique aspect of Ross that I think is super valuable.
Yeah, I think those MBA 2s are going to be like a huge advocate for, and the people in your group in general, they're going to be an advocate for you, but they're also not going to go easy on you. They want you to be successful and give you honest feedback, and it, it has good results. I think that's something that's really helpful, is there is that support, and that they're trying to bring out the best in you, and they're going to be your advocates. It's an incredible resource. So the other really great resource is the Finance Club. So Jen, you want to talk about that as our president?
Yeah, absolutely. So Amari kind of mentioned a bit about what we do in the Finance Club at the top of the presentation, but essentially the Finance Club is divided into two different silos. We have the investment banking silo, which we'll talk more about tonight, but we also have the corporate finance silo, which also meets, every Sunday during the recruiting process in kind of a parallel path to investment banking recruiting. So that definitely is something that is there if that's something you're interested in. But for the sake of investment banking silo, so it meets every single Sunday where you go over just major deadlines, things you should know, and works in tandem with the fact group curriculum to make sure that you're not missing any sort of corporate presentation, application deadline, or just anything important to know so you can stay on track along with the timeline that Taya mentioned of the recruiting process. We also have a partnership with Wall Street Prep, so you get access to that. So you get their whole entire library of content. And we also sponsor individual webinars. So one that we did last year during my recruiting process was going through each of the three statements, each of the three financial statements, so income statement, cash flow statement, and balance sheets, and talking about how changes to it would affect it, which is absolutely something you're going to get asked about during the recruiting process. So it was really helpful to have a live teacher that was just a different avenue than an MBA 2 teaching you something, and having an experienced professional do it was just, maybe if you weren't grasping the concept one way, it was just another way to do it. We do mock coffee chats, mock interviews, go over all the technicals that Karnika mentioned in Fact Group. And we also have so many resources collected over the years. So I think ones in particular that are so valuable are, we have a huge question bank of every single question that has ever been asked of someone in the recruiting process in years prior, which, funny enough, the banks love to recycle questions. So you're pretty well prepared for that when you've got access to what was asked in years prior. We've also got, the Rosenbaum textbook that in very good detail gives you insight into how the investment banking process works. And we also have the 400 question guides and so many different other resources that if you have a particular type of learning style, there is a resource for you to grasp all the content that you need to know, both for technical interviews and for practice for behavioral interviews.
Awesome. Tons of resources that honestly, I don't know. I've talked to some students and they've talked to peers at a variety of schools, and not everybody has this level of support. And so I think it is something special about Ross, especially when you factor in the combination with the career coaches, the prep over the summer that you get, the fact groups and those things. It really is unmatched support that's going to be there to help you through this process. I saw one question in the chat related to academics. So this is a sample of some of the electives and some of the courses that you can take. Maybe Jen, I know you did fast track in finance, so maybe you could speak to what that program is and how you thought it was helpful for you, and then maybe pick an elective or two that you particularly enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned before, having worked for SoulCycle and in entertainment, I had zero finance experience prior to coming to Ross. And I truly mean zero. So I think I saw a question in the Q&A about how having no finance experience, is that okay? It absolutely is okay. And I think in a lot of ways, some banks, obviously having finance experience is great, as Karnika has evidenced by her success in recruiting, but they're also looking for people with diverse backgrounds that will bring a different perspective to banking. So it's totally okay if you don't have, prior finance experience. So knowing that, I really wanted to participate in Fast Track to Finance because, I wanted to make sure that I was taking full advantage of that program and being able to start kind of a little bit ahead of everyone else so I could take more elevated finance classes when I got here. But even going into the Fast Track program, which, to explain exactly what it is, it's where you take the core finance and accounting classes over the summertime prior to starting at Ross, so that eventually when you get here, you're able to waive out of them, and then you can move on to more advanced finance classes such as valuations and corporate financial policy. And going into taking Fast Track to Finance, my mindset at the time was, whether I do well in this or not, at least I will just give myself a little bit of a foundation that when I get there, say I don't pass it, I can always take it again, right? Like it doesn't preclude you from taking the core finance and accounting classes once you get here, but it does give you the opportunity to test out of them. So thankfully I worked very hard over the summer and was able to pass those classes and get out of them. And so I was able to take valuations in fall A and then corporate financial policy in fall B. And those classes are really valuable because valuations, a lot of what you discuss in investment banking is how do you value a company. So having that class alongside the investment banking recruiting, like technical prep process, was really helpful to solidify my understanding of those concepts. And then corporate financial policy talks about capital structure of a company, which again, you're going to be tested on a lot of concepts about how much debt a company has, what their cost of capital is. And so all of those classes tied in very well to the investment banking recruiting journey at that point. And so, you can see a list here of other finance and investment banking electives. And I think two, I really want to highlight. So corporate financial reporting is on here. And I don't know if any of you all are on TikTok, but Ryan Ball is a fantastic accounting professor here. He went viral for teaching a class as a potato. So that's, you can look that up on your own time, but he is one of the most engaging professors I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. And I just feel so lucky that I got to take his class. And I was actually recommended to take his class in coffee chats with bankers at various banks who are Ross alumni, having them tell me, you have to take this class while you're there. It'll really help you in investment banking process. And then let's see what others, some good one. Yeah, valuations is super important too. And I think was a great class to take while here. So, and then, in your second year as an MBA too, you get to take pretty much all electives. So I'm really looking forward to taking a lot of the classes on this list that I'm either currently in right now or going to be taking in the winter quarters. So can't speak highly enough about the curriculum at Ross as far as investment banking goes.
Nice. Karnika, do you have any favorite professors or classes that you've taken or had recommended to you by alums too? I love that alums are saying, take this course, it'll help you.
Yeah, I certainly had a list of courses that certain alumni recommended me, like sent a list of finance courses. So that was super helpful. But I was going to talk about corporate financial reporting as well. I think that was incredible for me. But maybe I'll talk about modeling, because that's also another course I took with Professor Lee. And I think what I really liked about that course was at the end of the course was we had to build an LBO model from scratch. And I remember being stuck with it for multiple days just because my formulas weren't working and nothing was working out. But when I figured it out, like every day, when I just made improvements in it and finally turned out an LBO model. I was so proud of myself and I felt like I learned so much from that experience. So I loved that class just because of that, one experience. But like Jen said, I'm looking forward to private equity finance next semester, which I've enrolled in, and also impact of financial markets on social welfare. I think they are two very interesting courses. Private equity finance is more like everything about private equity finance, but the interesting thing, it ends with you participating in the Michigan Private Equity Challenge, where you can develop an investment pitch for a buyout fund, which is based in Chicago. And that's part of the course. I think that goes back to what I was saying. There are a lot of courses that have action-based learning incorporated within them. And this was an example of one such course that has a lot of learning by doing kind of opportunities. And the other course, the impact of financial markets, that's more of like a qualitative course, which I'm super interested in to go for next semester as well. And that talks about all the financial crises that have happened over the past decades and what kind of social cost has there been of these crises, and in terms of buyouts and bailouts and so on. So I think that's kind of like an interesting perspective that I'm looking forward to get.
I didn't know about that private equity course. That's interesting. I love doing these webinars and learning about new things from our students. Even though I've worked at Ross over 10 years, I'm still learning about really cool opportunities. So I love that. I just have a couple more slides. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. We will get to them or answer them broadly if they might apply to a lot of people. So go ahead and do that if you have questions, because I think we just have a couple more slides here and we'll wrap things up. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned the incredible alumni and network. We've talked a lot about how our career coaches can be support and current students, and a little bit about alums, like maybe recommending a course or being there to host for some of these treks. But this is a partnership for a lifetime. Alumni are going to be involved in your experience, but you're going to be staying connected to Ross well beyond the 2 years that you're in Ann Arbor. So the University of Michigan Alumni Network is over 600,000 people. Ross in particular has over 50,000 alumni. So it's a pretty deep network. I'd say the most passionate alumni network out there. I, like Amari, did undergrad here, so slightly biased, but truly believe it. And they're going to be, really involved in your experience. But I think the right side of the slide is talking about a program that's pretty unique. It's called Alumni Advantage, where you have access to tuition-free executive courses for your lifetime, executive education courses for your entire lifetime. So even after you graduate, if maybe you take on a leadership role and want to come back to brush up on some leadership skills, or there's something that you want to brush up on a completely different path. Maybe you're making a pivot and you want to take a different type of course, or maybe you're just curious. You have that intellectual curiosity and you want to come back. These are courses that typically companies pay for their employees to take, that run about $10,000 for a week-long course that you get to take for completely no cost. So it's a really great opportunity to acknowledge that this is a lifetime partnership that in your education and your professional career. Also, if you decide to go down an entrepreneurial path, you have access to lifetime coaching and advising from our entrepreneurial staff. And there is a designated career coach in our alumni relations office for you if you decide to make a pivot or need to talk to somebody about have some sort of career coaching, which isn't unlikely along the way. And then lastly, I want to share a little about how to stay engaged, how to keep in touch with the team. We have admissions blogs and vlogs, just recorded a couple of new vlogs, so take a look at those on the website. Over 300 current student ambassadors. Our student ambassador site is truly there to be a resource for you. So these are all students who volunteered, kind of like what Karnika was talking about, is this pay it forward mentality, where it was helpful for them to be talking to current students, and so they want to be helpful to you. You can filter by the clubs they're in, or the geography they were in before Ross, or the career interests that they have, and connect with students directly to ask about their experiences. And then we have a really incredible podcast that's completely student produced, dives deep into what the student experience looks like. So covers topics around everything from coming to an MBA with a partner or a family, to how to navigate business school as an introvert, to just weekly things around what events are happening around campus. So lots of content. I think they're in their 6th or 7th season now. So you can go deep into the podcast if that's something you're interested in. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and then get to some of these questions. There was one question I thought that Amari already answered that I think was helpful, that some people might, others might want to know too. And that's, if you're thinking about a plan A and a plan B, what are some of what's advice for that? Are there certain career interests that might make sense to go, to pair well with an investment banking, or what that looks like, if there's what people should think about for their plan B, if their plan A is this path. So does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the question was sort of rooted around consulting and banking. Is it doable? Is it possible to recruit for both? Is it something that we would advise? It's definitely something that we have historically discouraged, just because it's just a lot and can be overwhelming. There's a lot of touch points for each of those industries. A lot of consulting firms come, a lot of banks come here trying to juggle both of that, given that there's almost no overlap in terms of the structure of the interviews and like the technical components of them. And consulting casing is definitely far different than, the DCF and LBO analysis that like Janet Karnika had to do. It's a lot to try to do, and ultimately it just isn't all that necessary given how strong the numbers are in terms of win probability for investment banking. Whereas like, last couple of years, 93% of the students have gotten investment banking offers. Randy, who is the career coach who works with consulting in our office, he'll usually tell you that the number of students that get consulting offers versus the ones that want them, like usually it's around the 30 to 40% mark, right? So it's a pretty big difference. But ultimately, like if you're really interested in banking, you should feel pretty comfortable that you'll be able to get there. In terms of what would make for a good plan B, yeah, corporate finance makes a lot of sense, given that there is sort of some technical overlap. A summer in corporate finance would allow you to tell a credible story of how you got skills, experiences, connections over that summer that is going to help make you a more credible candidate for banking down the road, right? So you're still sort of within that wheelhouse, and that's ultimately what you're looking for. If for whatever reason, it doesn't work out for your plan A for the summer, what you want is an experience that helps you gather skills and experiences that are leverageable and connectable to what you ultimately want to do down the road. So when you have those discussions with those hiring managers, you can tell credible stories.
I see a question that might be good for Jenna Karnika about what types of questions you're asked during the interview. Is it focused on what your experience is like, or what that looks like? I know there's probably a lot of questions, but you want to give them a little bit of a window into what the types of questions are that you're asked during the interview process.
Yeah, I can give some color on that. I think probably 3 segments of questions. The first one is really to check your commitment. And that includes questions like about your background. Why do you want to do banking? Why do you want to do it at this bank? Or which industry do you want to do it in? So that's right, really checks your commitment for banking. The second segment is related to your background, to the extent that they could ask about projects from your resume, or examples from your prior professional life about where you faced a conflict or shown leadership or faced a challenge. And so those kind of questions, which I broadly club into behavioral questions, really come into the second segment of question. And the third one is really the technical questions. So questions on accounting, valuation, enterprise equity value, LBOs, or even the market. So have you been following the market? What news have you read? Or have you been following the deals? So that's basically like all the technical questions are in the third segment. That's the plethora of questions that can be asked.
Yeah, I would just also add to the testing the level of commitment. You'll also get a lot of questions about what is your understanding of what an investment banking associate does, just so they're aware that you've done your research into what your role would actually entail. And then you would also get a lot of questions about perhaps managing someone who might, for us non-finance people coming into it, managing an analyst who might know more information or more hard skills about the role than you do, and how would you manage that relationship? So those are just two things I would add to that.
Great. I see a question about the buy-side recruiting resources. Like Amari said, we are going to have another webinar, but maybe you want to touch on things a little bit about that.
Yeah. So what was this? Okay, so the question is, can you talk a little bit about the buy-side recruiting resources? What was the success rate for the 30 students that pursued that path? Did most of them have prior buy-side experience? The last question first, most of them do not have previous work experience on the buy side. It's relatively rare to have buy side experience coming into an MBA program, just because most of the people that do have that experience typically want to stay on the buy side and typically don't leave those roles. The vast majority of the 30 that got into buy-side work was through venture capital. I think 19 of the 30 or so was VC, and yeah, almost none of them not only had buy-side experience, but most of them didn't have any finance experience at all. Not a requirement for the VC side, more so on the private equity side. If you do want to do private equity, typically they do want to see some valuation and deal experience, whether that be banking or private equity based. But even then, there's some exceptions. Like Zix, who I'm thinking of, he is an MBA too, who got a internship with a private equity firm in Alabama and didn't have any previous work experience in the space. Success rate, that is harder to gauge and track because for the banking stuff, there's sort of a known entity of banks that we sort of partner with that like mostly come here and present, they recruit on campus. We see their engagement on Ross Recruit on our recruiting platform. So it's just a lot easier to track, and it's a kind of a small number, a tight knit group of 30 students that I can interact with and find out directly, like who'd you interview with, who'd you get offers with, who'd you accept with, and I can sort of track that. It's a lot looser and harder to track on the VC side. Those interviews typically don't happen until later in the calendar. So on the banking side, you're pretty much going to be wrapped by December, mid-December now. Whereas on the VC side or all buy side stuff, you really could be going into March, April, May timeframe. I mean, I literally had a private equity firm come to me in July this past summer, 4 months ago, looking for an intern for that summer, right? Like they don't, it's just a different sort of mindset. They, on the buy side, are really just in time driven and don't think about like hiring a class of 50, 70 interns like a lot of these banks do. And so there's a lot less visibility and a lot less structure. And because of that, you have a lot of students that really kind of want to do it and have a plan A, but a lot of times go into their plan Bs because their plan Bs, the opportunity sort of manifests quicker and earlier, and they have to make a call on plan B months before sometimes they're even going to know about their plan A. And so, if I was to track that, does that mean would I track that as a failure or a miss? Not necessarily, right? So it's a lot harder to track. So we don't have success rate numbers on buy side stuff, but the fact that 30 people were able to do it is very, very encouraging and promising to just a raw student's ability to make it happen if they want to. The last question on there was around the resources for the VC private equity stuff. I keep a great document of resources on the PE VC stuff that really goes through all all things of the industry, state of the industry stuff, compensation, what these jobs actually are, how you put together investment theses, how they think about KPIs and market sizing and term sheets. And there's podcasts on there, there's books on there, there's job boards on there, and there's also a list of over 100 VCs and private equity firms that we have sort of connections with, that have hired raw students, that have interviewed raw students recently, or and all the companies are hyperlinked to their actual websites. You can click on and check on their what their investment methodology is, what's in their portfolio. So that's a great resource. The funds that Taya mentioned earlier, also a great resource. It really is just about being part of the ecosystem between the clubs, the FAC group, the funds, going on like the IM Trek that I hosted, going on the like being part of like something like Pitches and Pizza, which is something I try to do each year, where I grab a couple of VC partners and have students do like individual VC pitches to them. Probably do it over Zoom again, and just really give the students a sort of feel for what an interview might look and feel like, but in a low pressurized environment where they can get feedback from high ranking VC executives in the space on whatever their thesis and deck sort of looks like. So getting involved in all of that, and yeah, being willing and ready for a grind and a little bit of uncertainty. But students, I've been very, very impressed with their ability to make it happen if that's the road they choose to go down.
Well, it is. We have about 3 minutes left, so I'm gonna wrap things up here. We can try to answer a few of the questions over chat, but I'm gonna pose a question to Jen and Karnika that is a little unrelated, but some of these people may have never been to Ann Arbor. So I want to close with, what is a recommendation or a favorite thing to do in Ann Arbor?
I can start. I mean, like I said, I've lived in California my entire life before coming here. I came here sight unseen because it was during COVID, and I figured there's probably not a lot of energy on campus anyways because it's COVID. So I'm just relying on the laurels of the Ross reputation for coming here. But I do think that fall is really special. I mean, I've never really experienced this kind of foliage in my entire life, but fall football in Michigan is an unparalleled experience. And if you can make it to either of the 2 remaining game days that are home games this year, please do. If not, it's just, again, the community aspect of Ross is so incredible and such an amazing part to be a part of. So our Ross tailgate's really fun. It's a conversation for another time, but if you can make it out in the fall before it gets cold, please do.
I was gonna say football as well, but that is totally true. Attending a Michigan game is just like the best Ann Arbor thing you can do. I guess also just walking around. I love walking around in downtown. There's such cute restaurants and cafes that you can sit and hang around with friends. I think that's incredible. That's a very Ann Arbor thing as well for me.
Nice. All right. Well, we will wrap things up. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you learned a lot. Like I said, I'm always grateful when I get to continue learning and hearing about these stories from our students. So hopefully you found value as I did. So thank you to Amari, to Jen, to Karnika, and good luck with your recruiting journeys to all of our prospective students. Go Blue.